the great thing about being a public festival connected to a major market is that you're creating a space in which public, industry, press, filmmakers, guests, they're all converging in one space. Everything from, a 2-hour feature to episodic to microdramas. And so what a market allows us to do is support the ecosystem of it all. And it also allows us to be nimble. What we heard most from our industry stakeholders was like, we need more opportunities to come together, not less.
Yeah.
We need more opportunities to have face-to-face meetings and make decisions and move things forward.
TIFF has long been one of Toronto's most iconic cultural institutions, attracting filmmakers, talent, and audiences from around the world. But this year, TIFF is entering an exciting new chapter with the launch of The Market, a bold initiative designed to bring together the business, creative, and innovation communities behind storytelling.
Whether you're a filmmaker, creator, entrepreneur, or simply someone who just loves Toronto's cultural scene, this conversation is really about the future of how stories are made, shared, and experienced.
I think for many years, Toronto has played other cities in films. It's kind of
It's a stunt double.
Exactly. It's one of the great, city stunt doubles. And it's changing with the success of Canadian content.
There's no better city than Toronto that is so culturally diverse and really draws people into the festival to be able to have this added element that is the market.
The public aspect in our minds is the power in which this market is successful.
So Geoff, welcome to the table. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
It's really great to have you here today. Last year, TIFF celebrated its 50th, big milestone for the festival. And this year, there's an added element, the market that'll be at the TIFF, at the festival, sorry. Why do you think this was the time for the market to be introduced to the festival?
Yeah, I feel like last year was such a celebration of not only TIFF and what we've been able to kind of accomplish over the last 50 years, but also for the city to kind of rally behind this staple event that we've hosted. And the timing is interesting because when you get to 50 years old, you start thinking about what's next. What is that kind of next chapter? Whether you're an organization or a human or whomever you are, you're thinking about what's next. And so, for us, for a long time as an organization, we've been mulling over the idea of what does it look like if not only are we supporting kind of the film from its final state, the idea of okay, we're bringing a film to the festival, we're supporting artists via that and that completed film, and we're bringing it to public audiences.
Right.
What if it looked like we tripled down on the idea of the screen sector, the industry that makes, films, brings them on screen, sells those films, packages them, produces them, creates them? What if we doubled down on that? Yeah. The analogy that I make is a farmer's market doesn't just support the kind of people that are buying produce and product, it also supports the farmer. And so if we're doubling down on supporting that farmer, what does that look like? And it made sense in terms of timing because we felt like there wasn't something like this in North America, a major public festival, for us, the biggest in the world, 700,000 public attendees each year.
Wow,
What does that look like if you added that market element? And that's what excited us.
Yeah, I mean, you're making the flip side of 50 look really good, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something to be so excited about just because it's there's no longer that midlife crisis at 50. It's you're adding something new. There's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And it's something that a lot of film festivals haven't actually dug deep into. So on that note, how do you think the idea of the market and that coming into fruition is going to expand that role of a traditional film festival?
Well, I think that, I think it's really important to kind of define the difference between what a festival is in its core and what a market is in its core. Yeah. A festival in its core is really a celebration of art and celebration of curation of films and bringing those films to a public audience and doing that. And we've had such success doing that. And, we've gone from being a festival to not only that, but also being a year-round home of celebrating film with TIFF Lightbox.
Yeah.
And to define the market is really about like supporting the ecosystem of film. And we also wanted to think more broadly of not just film. I think any consumer of content today recognizes that, it's more complicated. There's many ways to watch films, whether it's, in a theater, at your home, on an iPad, whatever it is. And they come in different shapes and sizes, everything from, a 2-hour feature to episodic to microdramas. And so what a market allows us to do is support the ecosystem of it all. And it also allows us to be nimble. Festivals that are 50 years old, it's a little more challenging to be nimble because you've created a blueprint of success.
Yeah.
When you build a market, you're kind of able to adapt to the changes within that industry, whether you have, large conference talks or, spaces to sell and buy. Like, you're able to be nimble and evolve to what that industry is looking for most.
Yeah.
And I think what most people are looking for most in the industry right now is to be sustainable and, continuing to do what they love to do, which is create, produce, distribute, sell, buy, all of those things. And that's what the market brings to the table.
Yeah. I think it's really great that TIFF has always been sort of at the forefront of what's going on and has constantly been evolving with the years and with the times. And obviously we know that there's a lot that has changed in media and film in recent years. You mentioned some of it just now, but maybe get into some of the details around what is in the market and what specifically, like, what opportunities and gaps are you hoping to achieve and to resolve with this initiative?
Yeah, I think the big gap is really around, like, you have only a few kind of major global film festivals that are paired with a major global marketplace. The big ones within the kind of film context are really Berlin, the Berlinale, plus the European Film Market, which happens in February. Then you have Cannes. You have the Cannes Film Festival plus the Marché de Film. That is that other big moment. And then in the fall, it gets a little complicated. You have events like Telluride in the U.S. You have Venice. You have TIFF. And for us, it's like, okay, how do we define ourselves as something a little different in a kind of crowded space?
Yeah.
And so the market allows us to do that in many ways. And it also allows an opportunity for the kind of business that might start in Cannes to continue because, coming out of, the global pandemic, what we heard most from our industry stakeholders was like, we need more opportunities to come together, not less.
Yeah.
We need more opportunities to have face-to-face meetings and make, decisions and move things forward. We're not looking to kind of, continue this idea of like, moving everything digital because it's harder for that kind of those real connections to be made. And so we really feel like we're kind of filling a really important gap in the marketplace right now. And that was very much determined by, consultancy, working closely with the federal government, working closely with all of our key partners who kind of trust that 50-year-old TIFF brand that, we're able to deliver and that we're able to listen to them to understand what they need most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think two things. It's really, I think the timing of when TIFF happens is actually nicely positioned. It always feels to me like it's
The end of summer.
Yeah,
almost.
the wrap up of
Yeah.
our like summer, right? In a nice way. And so we always look forward to it because Toronto is very much a city of festivals. And I think to what you're speaking to with that positioning, like there's no better city than Toronto that is so culturally diverse and really draws people into the festival to be able to have this added element that is the market. So more specifically for anyone who's listening or watching, who is the person who is the ideal attendee of the market? Like who should be attending? And more so for people who are not seen, maybe they're thinking like they're not traditional, film going person.
Yeah, no, good question. We're trying to kind of cast a wider net of how we define industry, especially in this moment of time. So
Right.
the industry in kind of traditional terms, it would be someone that is distributing a film. So we would call those acquisitions executives. Someone that is kind of selling that film to them, so a sales executive. Someone that is producing that film, so producer. And then filmmakers as well. Those are kind of your kind of traditional categories.
Yeah.
What we're saying is we don't want to kind of look only within those categories. Those are obviously core to our success.
Yeah.
But we want to think more broadly. What does it look like if we bring showrunners into that mix? What does it look like if we bring writers into that mix? What does it look like if we're bringing kind of brands into that mix? What does it look like if we're doing live podcasts and bringing that into the mix?
Yeah.
That's what kind of a market of the future really requires, because the industry necessitates those types of conversations. And those are the types of speakers that we'll be bringing to the table as part of the market, as part of our large scale summit. Those are the companies that will have spaces that are kind of promoting what they do, whether it's tax incentives or whether it's global productions in a specific region in the world, all of those things. So that kind of idea of kind of widening our understanding of who is that ideal kind of customer of the market is really key. But one thing I love that you talked about is the public aspect of this.
Yeah.
The public aspect in our minds is the power in which this market is successful, because one of the great things that a global industry loves about Toronto is this idea that public perception can influence the success of a film. For example, I'll give a great example. We hosted a screening a couple of years ago, and we brought in a bunch of buyers to that screening who were all excited to see a new film that had yet to be released. It's never even hit a festival. We also brought in TIFF's very hungry, eager audience who just loves film.
Yeah.
And seeing those buyers watch that film with a public audience, we essentially created a test screening. And out of that screening, the film that we showed sold for $40 million like days later.
Wow, it's incredible.
Based on public response. And so that film was Alexander Payne's The Holdovers. And it just speaks to the mighty Toronto audience and the role that they can play in the success of what eventually is released and eventually what other people see, whether it's in theaters or at home, etc.
Yeah,
Right.
that's like amazing, because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of the festival. I've been to a few in my life, and one thing that's so unique is when you are there at the film, sometimes with the talent, you're almost immersed into it and everybody's going on this exciting journey. And people are like, I was in films where people have cried together and laughed together and applauded together. And it's a really unique experience, unlike going to like the movies on any normal day, right?
People are there like so intentionally, I feel. And I
Yeah.
think that's the difference, is that people are coming to see the films and be a part of that festival culture. I want to clarify something, because I feel like some of our listeners may not know what is the idea of the market, because I think it's such a big concept, and we're talking a lot about who it's for.
Yeah.
But maybe in your words, you can talk a bit about what is it, because it's not a street festival.
Totally.
And that's probably what people might think of when they first hear it. But maybe you can clarify, what will that actually look like and how people can participate in it?
That's a great question. Maybe before I jump in and answer that question, one other example that I think is very fitting in this moment about that kind of public power I was just talking about is a film like Obsession, which is this summer's biggest blockbuster by YouTube creator. That film was screened in Toronto last year and did not have any distribution. So it sold out of it. And so I think your point about the idea of like public response, it really works really well with genre and horror films, because it's like, if I'm sitting at home watching a horror film and not seeing anyone else react to it, I'm going to have one opinion of it. When an entire crowd is like, shaking or, jumping, you can feel that.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that. To your point in relation to like clarifying the definition of a market, it's really a good question, because we've talked a lot about this at TIFF, and my colleagues like Cameron Bailey and Anita Lee, we all, 3 years ago went to the federal government to explain what we were doing. In defining a market, we realized like, actually, this is harder than we thought. But, what we got to the understanding of is like, when we talk about a market in film terms, the term market is more popular. But when we talk about it in comparison to other industries, I think the most common comparisons are large-scale trade shows or kind of tech conventions. Things like that. Even something like the Calgary Stampede, in which the Calgary Stampede is I think besides us, the largest kind of like event in Canada, but it's also not only supporting public, but also kind of the industry as well. And so that's another interesting comparison. But what really, in terms of like what it looks like on the ground, is there's going to be, large scale talks in a big auditorium where the industry and public are learning from incredible visionary speakers. There's going to be a large scale, we'll call it exhibition space, that is very much the trade show side of it, where people will have spaces that are kind of selling films and incentives and all of those things. And then one of my favorite, more lesser known parts of the market is really on the talent development side of things. So, TIFF not only supports talent through like showing films, but we also support talent at every stage in their careers. And I think one of the exciting things that we have, similar to another kind of popular festival like Sundance, we have an incredible group of talent development labs where we're essentially supporting directors, screenwriters, and showrunners and giving them kind of one-on-one access to mentorship, to guest speakers, in which they are kind of developing, whether it's their scripts, whether it's their films. And the cool thing about it is that it's something that we're able to see a direct line of success to, because it's like, I see it every year where we'll, be working on supporting a project at its earliest stage, at script stage, in our project development lab. And then 2 years later, it premieres at the festival. And that's something that I think that, public audience and Torontonians might not know, but we're seeing that in real time, which is really exciting.
Yeah. No, super exciting. I think, I feel like whenever we talk about the talent that exists in Toronto, there's always this sort of, I don't know, for me, it's sort of an unfortunate thing sometimes when you have an incredibly talented city and anyone who rises to a certain level is lost to another city or is out of the country as well. So talking about Toronto's global positioning in the film industry, I feel like as a city, we are continuously evolving to be able to support we're basically seen as a creative and business destination. So, and TIFF is certainly like very a big part as to why we continue to evolve. What do you think makes Toronto so unique as a destination in being able to host this marketplace for storytelling and creatives?
Yeah, I think there's like maybe two parts to that question. Maybe tackling this first part about like, Toronto as a production hub and Toronto as a place. Like, I think for many years, like Toronto has played other cities in films. It's kind of
it's
like
a stunt double.
Exactly. It's one of the great, city stunt doubles. But I think that's changing. I think that and it's changing with the success of Canadian content and, Ontario creators and production in the city. And I know that, our partners, whether it's at Telefilm Canada or Ontario Creates, are doing incredible work in this space. And they're really making kind of Toronto and Canada a production hub. And that is great to see. And I think I hear all the time, like one of the great examples is like, Guillermo del Toro, who, is kind of, Toronto is kind of like embraced him as their own in many ways. Sure. He looks at Toronto as this like, incredible place to shoot, not only because he loves the city, but he loves the craftsmanship, the people that he's able to employ in Toronto, Torontonians that are behind, Frankenstein as an example, which then, goes on to be nominated for Academy Awards and win some. And so I think that Toronto power is really important. And I think that the market acts as a nice pairing with the success of, Toronto creators and Canadian creators and that kind of production growth in the city. Because at the end of the day, we'll have 6,000 professionals that will be here in year one. Wow. That will be able to see the greatness of this city.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that question, in addition to, the production side of things, it's like Toronto is a great city to play host. Obviously we're playing host right now to the World Cup. But, we are a great host because we have 2 major airports. We are accessible for kind of global travelers. We have an incredible hospitality scene, maybe one of the most underrated kind of restaurant destination in the world, in my opinion.
100%.
Yeah. And
Totally.
like a diversity in terms of cuisine and people and, businesses, which is, incredibly exciting for global travelers. Because I think one of the things that I love is like every time I talk to a global film professional, that when they talk about coming to Toronto for TIFF and the market, the likelihood that they have a relative here is very high.
Yeah.
Everyone is just like, oh, I love Toronto and my brother's there, or, my, whomever, or, my parents live there. And I think that like that speaks to the kind of diversity of the city and what we can kind of bring to the table when it comes to these like large scale global events, which kind of TIFF the festival and TIFF the market will be.
Yeah. I just want to add to that I think that when all of those things make Toronto so unique as a city. And I do think people are waking up to cuisine, the festival, and just all these different industries. But the fact that we also have all of these all sort of like in the downtown core, right? TIFF is so central to the entertainment district. And to know that you can experience all of these within a walking distance. And I would imagine the market is going to expand that footprint even further.
Yeah. And you mentioned footprint. I think that was always such an important part of our decision making with this market. It's like, how do we make a contained footprint in the 5th most populated city in North America? How do we make this a walkable event? Because when you go to other markets and festivals, that's really hard kind of from an infrastructure standpoint.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we have done is that this festival market will be walkable. Every venue is within like 10 to 12 minutes away from each other. The city has been hugely supportive of the festival, allowing us to kind of shut down King Street and really turning King Street into a celebratory space where, whether you're here to watch a film, whether you're here to do business, you can navigate a city like that. And there's no way that those other top 5 major cities would be able to pull that off. And I think I remember I've been at TIFF for 18 years and going back to the first year where, the city supported us in doing that. Of course, there's Torontonians that are like, how am I going to get to work? But I think the city has completely embraced it at this stage. And
you just know. It's like you need to know in your calendar, mark it out. And
figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
There's other streets. It's just King. Come on.
Totally. We're here to stay. We'll make it worth your while. And, we will. My favorite TIFF moment, ever was I also programmed series for the festival, which is, I think, a real passion of mine to like bring, new content from series creators to the festival. And we premiered the Tragically Hip documentary that was on Amazon Prime. And we did a full-on sing-along parade down King Street with the band. And it will go down as my favorite TIFF memory ever. And that's because of, the city itself, but also that public energy that the kind of city can kind of rally behind.
Absolutely. When you compare it to other cities that have film festivals, how would you say Toronto, I guess, differentiates? Are there any other things aside from their culture, or how would you say like the other cities compare?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it by not criticizing other cities. I'm going to answer it like, one of the first festivals that I ever went to, 15 years ago was the Berlinale and the Berlin Film Festival. I think it's an interesting comparison to ours, where Berlin is a kind of a great, like, cultural destination in which you're kind of inspired by art and etc. I think one of the, and it has a major festival and has a major market. The thing about Berlin is timing of the year. I have only visited Berlin in the dead of winter. And so I see that sitting in a certain light. Yeah. And then you have Cannes, where this is kind of a destination town that hosts big events almost on a weekly basis. There's always some sort of destination thing happening in Cannes.
Yeah.
I am not good in a climate where I'm worried about getting sunburned and getting to my meeting at the same time. So I have a certain opinion about Cannes because of that. The nice thing about Toronto is in all its shapes is like you're in a major city that appreciates culture at the perfect time of year.
Yes.
And I think it's funny when people talk about me that don't know the city well. One of the first things they'll say is it cold in Toronto at that time of year? I was like, no. That is my that point in the year. That is my jam when it comes to weather in this city, and I think we're well positioned because of that.
Yeah, we're lucky. We're really lucky.
Yeah, super lucky. And I was sharing with Tiana earlier because I just got back from travels, and I went to see the home of one of the major festivals in the world, and I will say it was very much a destination, and almost underwhelming, because if it's not being programmed in the moment, it just sort of kind of sits there.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of TIFF, is that you have throughout the year, there's all this programming that's taking place. Then it all leads up to this wonderful festival. And I think everybody just gets excited, even if they don't have tickets or they're not on the rush of the line. They're just like, they want to be on Festival Street. They want to be in a near bar. So it's the year-round programming mixed with the fact that the festival is very integrated into the urban environment. So you get to actually be in some of these wonderful spaces like Roy Thompson Hall, Princess of Wales Theatre, Royal Alex. So it's really it's really nice to be able to get a true taste of Toronto. And if you don't make it for the festival, that there are other times of the year where you can actually still really
enjoy it.
Yeah.
True.
Completely. Yeah. And I think that, when we built, I've been at TIFF so long that I remember when, TIFF Lightbox was built, and the idea of like creating this kind of shrine and celebratory space for cinema then and seeing what it's become has been really exciting. And part of my job is also I have a team that oversees our theatrical business year round, which brings films to the Lightbox year round, new releases, etc. And every festival we see this bump post festival into the fall season of box office, because people who might go to the theater a few times a year to see a film, the festival reminds them of the power of film. It's like, oh my gosh,
yes.
Well, I have been missing out on this.
Yeah.
What have I been doing with myself? Why I've been, why have I been at my home watching these great films on a certain screen? The festival reminds people of that. And we see our box office numbers, really jump post-festival. And it is that momentum. We have an incredible memberships team that is building loyalty year round, and that loyal audience is really shows up. And I will say that the exciting thing is that our loyal audience and our demographic is younger than it's ever been. Wow. And I think that a lot of similar organizations globally struggle with that. How do you crack that under 25 audience? And I think one thing that, the team at TIFF was so smart at doing is they created this under 25 year membership. So if you're under 25, you can see classics and you can have access to all these incredible films. And that has changed our demographic greatly in a very short period of time. And that's pretty exciting when you're in that building, whether you're doing an introduction or you're, there just to have a drink or, whatever it may be, whatever reason brings you to it, to see the diversity and the youth of our audience and how that's changed is pretty special.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Yeah.
I'd say, yeah, because it's pretty hopeful for the next generation, because in this day and age where everyone seems to have their face in their own personal devices and can get things for free, it's really good to know that people are really looking for ways to engage in person as well.
I think it's also like the street festival adds a lot to that too.
Totally.
It's like there's so many students who will come to get like their free samples and stuff, and then they'll be like, oh, but there's films. Like, how do we, you know, stick around for that? So I think TIFF does a great job in drawing in like even that whole student crowd and, you know, bringing people in. Yeah. So we want to jump into a quick fire with you.
Right.
So
let's do it.
we have some fun questions.
All right.
It's a quick fire, so gotta answer fast.
Yeah. So you're a film buff, I would assume, having been in the film industry for as long as you have.
Yes.
So the first question is, what's a film everyone should watch at least once?
I love this question. And it's the hardest question you've asked me. You know, the one that comes to mind is Singing in the Rain.
A classic. I love that one. Yeah.
And I know it's a short question, but I think it's just to answer, give a little bit of reasoning behind my answer is because I think it's a great film for people to watch and understand like a turning point in an industry and how that can kind of influence what people see. The idea of kind of, you know, a musical about this transition from silent film to talkies. And that's why I love it.
And meanwhile, they were actually transitioning into like Technicolor film at that time.
Right.
So it's really, really cool. Yeah. Mine is Sound of Music.
Oh, we're in the same ballpark
here. Okay. What's a city that inspires you creatively?
The one that jumps out at me is Paris. But there's a reason behind it, because I think the real answer is like any city that feels like a kind of an explosion of culture, where the people within that city appreciate culture at a whole nother level. And, you know, with Paris, it's a city of like great museums, great architecture, great film lovers. And so that's one that every year I can't help but be inspired by. And I look at kind of cities like Toronto as like not far behind.
In its own unique way too, right? Because when you get back, I just got back from Paris actually.
Oh, nice.
And to be able to come back, it was just so nice to be able to, like, you realize like, wow, Toronto is like a brand new city. Like it feels so fresh compared to Paris, which is like thousands of years on us, but
totally
incredible.
Yeah.
Next question. One trend shaping the future of storytelling.
Oh, well, I think the big one right now, and I kind of alluded it earlier, is this kind of like jump from kind of YouTube creator to kind of box office success. So this idea of like creator economy, and, you know, with a film like, you know, Obsession or Backrooms, like there's a moment here. And I think that like some people might think that this kind of shocked the industry, but I do think there's people in the industry that knew this was coming. And, in what world, and I say this as a Star Wars lover, in what world does a YouTube creator, have a film as a summer big blockbuster hit that beats, a Mandalorian film? Like there's something wild going on here.
Yeah.
And it's very encouraging to emerging creators who are trying to find space.
Yeah, I think it's changing everything so far. It's like you kind of have to jump on that bandwagon to stay up to date. Okay, what's one thing people misunderstand about the film industry?
Oh my gosh. I think the big one is that it's not as glamorous as it's made it to be. And now I have many friends that are just like, oh my gosh, your job must be amazing. You must be hanging out with kind of actors and celebrities and all these people all the time. And I'm like, emails and meetings, that's really the bulk of it. Yeah. But I will say that like there is these moments, and it comes every September, and it, where you have this, the year is tough. Like, for anyone in any job, like work is work. And I think that like with TIFF, we are at the end of the day a not-for-profit organization, but a big brand. And so the labor, the employees, the volunteers, they put everything into getting this thing off the ground. It is tiring, and they, are amazing at what they do. And I think, But the nice thing about TIFF is that we get to see the results of that. You know, some people might work in jobs where it's hard to see the results of the hard work.
Yes.
But when you are in that cinema, whether you're backstage or front of house or wherever, you're seeing an audience react to something that you helped create.
Yeah.
You didn't create the film itself, but you created the
Experience.
ecosystem and the experience for it to happen.
Yeah.
And that is a magical moment. And that is something that, like, you know, I love seeing a first year staff member experience, because their face lights up and all of that hard work leading up to it feels like it was worth it. So as much as it, you know, to answer your question, it's more mundane than you think, but there are those special glamorous moments that you will hold on to, you know, forever.
And I'm sure this time of year, it just sort of just ramps up and you're just in constant meetings and figuring it all out.
Oh, totally. I was saying this on my way here, where I was kind of like, taking off my meeting hat and putting on my, you know, interviewee hat.
Okay, next question. So if you could have dinner, we asked Cameron Bailey this question last year. If you could have dinner with any filmmaker, living or dead, who would it be?
My answer, you know, it might be a little obvious, but I grew up as an 80s kid, and I was just, you know, I grew up on Spielberg.
I knew you'd say that the second you said it.
You know, and I look at him as not only one of the great, you know, American directors that we have living today, but I also think he'd be a good hang, and I think his stories would be fascinating. And I actually have a very kind of quick anecdote of Spielberg, where one year I was at the, you know, Cannes Film Festival, and I was at an event which one of his films was premiering, and I was at the end of a pier. And he started walking to me, and I was like, this is my moment. This is my, you know, brief dinner moment with him, the dream scenario. And he's walking directly towards me, and I was like, okay, this is it. It can only be me that he's coming to, because it's me and then the water. And he said, excuse me. And I moved aside, and he got in a little dinghy, and he went off to his yacht. And I was just like, it wasn't me. It was the water the whole time. No. But even that was special enough. And he would definitely be my dinner partner choice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think mine too. You?
Yeah. I think for me, okay, so this is such a very niche answer, but one filmmaker I was really impressed by, because I used to do cinema studies in university. And it was, I think it's pronounced Georges Méliès.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Just because I think it's so cool that back at that time, he was basically a cinematographer that would cut together clips. And he was also like a magician and an illusionist. So he would, he had this one about like going to the moon and then like things appearing out of nowhere. And he would actually like cut together and paste clips together, and that was before editing or anything, so he was kind of like editing before editing on, you know, a computer was ever a thing. So I think that would be very interesting to have a conversation with such a creative mind to be like, how did you come up with that? And film was expensive, so that's a lot of risk too.
And someone also, I think that a really exciting thing with your answer is like someone that was in at the early stages of the medium, in a way of just like they're jumping from, you know, whether it's theater or whatever it is, they're jumping into this new medium at its like inception. And I think that, you know, being able to ask them all those questions would be pretty cool.
Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah.
I got one other question. What's one element or feature or part of the film festival that you enjoy, like maybe the most?
Oh, good question. My favorite part, and I kind of alluded to this a little bit, is we have these incredible talent development programs. And so in these talent development programs are like closed door sessions in which, you know, 20, say, directors, 10 global, 10 Canadian, are able to be in a small room with people of the same kind of stature, filmmaking wise, as Steven Spielberg. So, you know, we have incredible filmmakers globally that are very interested in giving back and sitting down with fellow creators at an earlier stage in their career to tell them all the secrets and to kind of give them advice. Being a fly on the wall in those conversations is my favorite part about the festival, because It allows me to kind of step outside all the things that are happening into a very kind of intimate space in which I can kind of not have to produce something. I'm a spectator. And when you're putting on a festival like that, it's rare to be a spectator. And so that would be mine.
Not everybody gets to see that. So that's something that's so super special that you get to witness.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's also like back to seeing your work, like seeing filmmakers, you know, adjusting their kind of story ideas or production plans based on the advice of these incredible speakers that we bring in. Like that's impacting, you know, the product or the art in a way. And seeing that in real time, again, not something that, you know, many people have the opportunity to see.
That's so true. Yeah.
So over the past decade, you know, we've seen this drastic shift in how people, you know, experience film. I mean, even when you think of like social media, AI, some of these changes, how do you think storytelling has evolved across film, television, just the way in which people like consume it?
I think that storytelling is kind of the constant in a way. I think storytelling is the thread that connects it all. And that's how we've been thinking about the market in many ways. Like, you know, whether you're telling your story on YouTube or on in a micro drama or a series, or if you're, you know, on a big screen, like a big, you know, whether it's documentary or kind of, you know, a big, you know, blockbuster type film, like, you know, story matters, and people are hungry for original stories, original storytellers. They're looking for something they haven't seen. I always answer the question of like, when I'm, you know, asked about like, how do I program? How do I select films or series for the festival? That's my answer. It's always like, something I haven't seen before. Show me something new and exciting. And so I think that story is the through way. And I think it's the ability for original creators and ideas to kind of shine regardless of what happens with the industry, whether, you know, you have studios buying each other or, you know, the kind of the emergence of AI or, you know, whatever it may be of that moment. Having story be the throughway is key. And, you know, that's why we didn't want this market to just be a film market. Like, we wanted it to be a content market in which story is really important. And so, you know, in addition to that, we will even have, and I kind of get into this, but we will have an immersive space, an immersive hub in the market where both public audiences and industry audiences are able to put on kind of headsets and walk into immersive spaces. Wow. But story is still matters. It's not it's not experimental. It's actually like there is a story and a pathway to it that as an audience member you can be a part of.
Yeah. It's interesting like how TIFF, I feel, has also evolved with the times and with the mediums of storytelling. So I've done the red carpet interviews for like the last 4 years. This would be my 5th going on with different publications. And it's just like, even to see the evolution in those last couple years of who is doing the interviews, it's so interesting. Yeah, so, because in the beginning, it was very, very tied to like strict publications, broadcasts to digital publications. And then in the last 2 years, there's been a massive shift towards a lot of creators with their own platforms now also interviewing on the carpet.
Totally.
So it's just cool to see how there is an evolution. The storytelling is still there, but the medium looks so different.
Yeah, completely. And you see that in news cycles, right? The idea of the Oscars will be kind of hosted on YouTube. That will be a, you know, broadcaster in the future. I think you see it in kind of like real time all the time of this shift. And I think, you know, I still find that kind of like story and the idea of being attracted to kind of seeing something or experience something is still the core of it all. And one of the cool things we're doing this year is we've heard a lot from kind of like publishing houses or video game companies that it's really hard to get like original IP in front of like film and series creators. And so we've kind of worked closely with our partners on Ontario Creates to build this IP exchange in which we will have the ability for publishing houses to say, I've got this IP, I've got this story.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with it. How do I connect with a producer so that producer is able to kind of option it and bring it to life to the big screen? Because I think that like we sometimes feel like we're out of stories. We have to recycle stories. We have to kind of, build universes or whatever it may be. There's so many original stories out there in this city alone.
Yeah.
Toronto Life is full of them. It's like, how do we look at those stories and say, is there a way, and this can be adapted into a short, a series, a feature, whatever it may be. Let's kind of lean into those Canadian stories and find life for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it's going to be such a cool way for people to connect beyond that typical, the typical connection they've got, which is probably much more almost like a red tape, like people can't access so easily.
Totally. And I think what TIFF has always done is we started as a people's festival, and, the public don't have access to festivals like Cannes. It is kind of an industry event. It's like, for, certain people only. And I think the great thing about being a public festival connected to a major market is that like you have this, you're creating a space in which public, industry, press, filmmakers, guests, they're all converging in one space. And it is an incredible melting pot of not only creativity, but excitement around, film and filmed entertainment and all of that. And that, I think, back to an earlier question you asked of what makes, Toronto unique. I think Toronto makes TIFF unique because of that.
Absolutely. Well, with all of that said, there's a lot to look forward to with TIFF and with the market. To end off, what is the thing that you are most looking forward to for the future of TIFF and Toronto's creative ecosystem?
I'm excited at, not only the industry just to kind of see and feel the kind of impact of this next chapter of TIFF, but I'm also excited to kind of bring that public audience in for the ride. And and we're going to do that. And I think that idea of Toronto feeling like they have ownership and power within this kind of industry and making sure that they know that, because they do, that's really exciting to me.
Yeah.
And so seeing our public audience respond to films that may lead to the sale of said film, and for that film to be distributed in 80 countries around the world, like for a public audience to know that they have a part to play on that, even if a small part, that's going to be exciting to see.
Yeah, that's super special. And for anyone who's wanting to find out more information about this year's festival and the innovation up in the market in general, where can they get more information?
Sure, yeah. So you can go to tiff.net and really learn all things about TIFF if you don't know of it already. So, you can learn more about our festival. You can learn more what we do year round. You can also learn more about the market. With both the festival and the market, there's going to be updates and exciting announcements really kind of on a regular basis between now and September. And I think both public audiences and professionals are going to be pretty excited about what we have in store for them.
Awesome.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for joining us.
No problem.
And honestly, what really stood out about this conversation is that TIFF isn't just celebrating stories anymore. It's helping shape the future of how stories are created, financed, shared, and experienced around the world.
And what's exciting is that Toronto is right at the center of that conversation. From filmmakers and creators to entrepreneurs, innovators, and the global industry leaders, the opportunities being created through the market have the potential to impact far more than the film industry.
Whether you're someone working in film, building a creative business, exploring new technologies, or just simply someone who's passionate about culture, this episode is a reminder that great stories don't happen in isolation. They happen when people, ideas, and communities come together.
A huge thank you again to Geoff Macnaughton for giving us a behind-the-scenes look at this exciting new chapter for TIFF and what it means for Toronto's creative scene.
And with that being said, we'll see you next time at the table.